Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. One of the interesting parts about my job is that it's not your typical security job. Now, notice I'm going to do something here. This is water. This is a snowball device. I'm going to be OK putting it on here because Bill's team did a really good job of making sure that it's water resistant. Well, customer proof is the real thing here. But security at AWS is a little bit different than it is at many organizations. We recognized a long time ago that in our business, our particular part of the market, if we don't get security right, we don't have a business. So literally, the way we phrase it, by the way, is a business-ending event if we get our security wrong. So security is, and Andy Jassy says this publicly all the time, job zero for us. It is the first thing that we do every day. The good news about security is that it's not that unusual. It's not that different running in AWS. I'll talk about how it's a little bit different from what you may do on premises right now. But more importantly than anything else, it's made up of very familiar pieces. You know, the people and processes, how we vet our staff, how they can operate, the systems and how you configure them and operate them, the network and how it's controlled, and the physical model that we operate under. You know, a data center is a data center. There are only so many ways that you can operate a building and put locks and gates and alarms and surveillance on it and that sort of thing. The cool part about our particular business is that we operate our security thresholds and controls the same across all of our infrastructure, bar two little changes. And that means that everybody who is a customer of our infrastructure gets the same advantage that all the big guys do. You know, when you think about from a corporate perspective especially, you've got large companies like Shell who have big, large, dedicated security teams who are really talented at what they do. But the startups that people talk about all the time often have no security staff whatsoever. By operating on our infrastructure, they get the benefit that the big guys push us really hard. When you look at the work that the federal space requires us to do for certification and accreditation, for example, every one of our customers gets to take advantage of that. And that's a really empowering thing. It's a real game changer for a lot of people. It raises the bar across the entire industry. Security is something that is not unique. It is not unusual. It is very familiar to people, in fact. It's about ensuring you've got the right visibility into your infrastructure and operations, that you can audit what's going on there, and that you can prove to your auditors, the people who are looking at how you do your business, that you're operating appropriately on our infrastructure, that you can control what happens when you're using our infrastructure easily and visibly. But more importantly, and this is not something that's usually associated with security, is agility. We believe that operating on AWS actually makes you more agile as an organization, and I'll tell you in a moment about why that's the case. So everything that we do is about how do we improve the status quo? How do we raise the bar? And more importantly, how do we prove to our customers that we're doing what we say we do? Now, for this particular audience, obviously, the FISMA and FedRAMP portion of our certification accreditation work is the most important, but we have an incredibly broad selection of compliance regimes since we do operate across an amazing number of verticals. And it applies to our infrastructure globally with two exceptions. One is that our GovCloud region operates only using US persons, and obviously we've got a classified region as well, and those operate according to slightly different guidelines. Operating security in AWS is something that we do jointly with our customers. This is a little bit different than somebody who's used to a completely outsourced model or a hosting model. In this circumstance, there are a series of controls that we operate on behalf of the customer. And if you look at a typical compliance framework, depending on which one of our services you're using, anywhere between a third and half of the controls we operate on behalf of the customer. And that relieves your teams from a lot of the heavy lifting of doing the control work, the validation, the monitoring, et cetera. However, there are then choices that you get to make as you go further up the stack. What operating system you run, how you configure applications, what firewall rule sets you use, how you do your network configurations, those sorts of things. And because everybody's business is different, we give you the flexibility to choose the security implementation that's correct for your particular application. Some applications are obviously intended to be public-facing and serving data out to the entire world. Some are intended that the data should never be public, and we have to give you the knobs and levers that are appropriate for you to make those decisions yourself. We get questions from customers quite frequently about I use this particular software package or this particular widget in my on-premises application right now. Can I use that on AWS as well? The good news is yes, you can. Not only does almost every single major software security vendor have an appliance, a module, package, and application available on AWS for use on our premises or on our cloud, but they also often are participants in the AWS marketplace, which means that you can buy their software using very flexible acquisition models. In fact, many of the companies have gone from a model where they used to only vend an enterprise license or a yearly license to an hourly license. Why is that interesting? Well, for one, it makes the procurement process a lot easier if you're using our marketplace and you have an existing agreement with us. The second is it allows you to try something very inexpensively and decide if you like it or not. And that allows people to see what's available in the marketplace. Does it fit their particular needs? Does it integrate with their existing stack? Can they use it effectively? And as you note, there's probably not a vendor up there that you guys don't recognize because it is all the big names in the security space. Let's shift gears slightly and talk about the visibility portion of security. I argue that if you don't know what's going on in your infrastructure, you can't secure it properly. And that starts off with visibility. So when I talk to customers, the more competent customers out there will tell me, yes, indeed, I map my networks, I know my infrastructure, I take a look at what's going on there so that I can determine what the security stance should be. Hey, great, you're ahead of probably 80% of the people out there. How often do you do it? Oh, I do it yearly. Well, we know that's a good starting point. However, we all know that at year plus 1 minute, what happens? Somebody changes something, and therefore your security is then out of date. So what's in your environment right now? How many of you have data centers? If you walk into a data center, does it look like this? That is a challenge to understand what is going where. I have operated data centers that look like that. Thank goodness Amazon's do not. But the important thing here is that when you operate in an API-driven infrastructure, this is what your data center looks like. It's clear, it's available to anybody who has the need to examine it, and most importantly, it's always current. So you know exactly what's going on in your infrastructure at any point in time. And it allows you to operate your security with your eyes wide open. There are no surprises. There's no machine that's tucked under a desk that somebody forgot about. There's no box that Bob installed in a data center and everybody is afraid to unplug because they don't know what it does. Everybody can see exactly where the machine came from, who connected it to what infrastructure with what rules at what point in time. And that helps dramatically when it comes to understanding your infrastructure, and therefore, I believe, in securing your infrastructure. Since we are completely API-driven, one of the most useful things that comes out of the entire process of working with us are logs. Logs are the detailed evidence of what happened in your infrastructure. This is something that's not typically available in most data centers. You don't have an immutable log that says, here are all the changes that were made over a particular point in time. In AWS, you do. And most importantly, you can assign rules for the access to that log so that you can say things like, the security team is the only one who's allowed to delete the logs. Unlike in most infrastructures where when somebody has administrator or root rights, they can delete the logs as well as make changes in the infrastructure. And that separation of duties is something that can give you a valuable edge in ensuring that you understand precisely what's happening and prevent people from hiding things. Let's talk a little about operating principles. Operating principles are the things that we do when we operate our infrastructure to help keep your information secure. So separation of duties. Lots of people understand separation of duties. They know what it means. We don't allow Bob to do things that could conflict with Sally's, and we don't allow Sally to do things which could allow her access to information she shouldn't have. In AWS, we have a bifurcation of responsibility model that goes both in the physical world and in the logical world. So in the physical world, for example, in one of our data centers, compare this to your on-premises environment right now. If you have a data technician who walks up to a machine that they can physically touch in a data center, what is the chance that they also have administrative rights on that machine? It's pretty high. That's the way most people operate. We don't. If you have physical access to our infrastructure, you are not permitted by policy to have logical access to that same infrastructure. Why? Because we want to make it really hard for any one person to compromise customer data. The first step in that compromise process is knowing where the data is. If you don't have logical access to the infrastructure, it's really hard to figure out which of these zillions of boxes contains the customer data I'm trying to target. So we have a rule that says if you have physical access, you can't have logical access, and the inverse is also true. So if you have logical access, you're not permitted physical access. Keep those jobs separate. We do the same thing with logical access between teams. Bill Vass is going to come up here and talk to you about storage platforms in a little bit. The people on his team are assigned access to the machines that are required to do their work in AWS. They are not allowed access to other service machines. We have this concept of host classes. They're machines that perform the same function. We have a permission system that assigns rights to access those host classes. And when somebody comes into the S3 service team, for example, their manager grants them rights to those S3 host classes that are necessary for them to do their job. They do not get rights to anything else, like EC2, for example. Furthermore, that manager has to revalidate that person's rights every 90 days, or the system automatically revokes it, which is a pretty powerful thing when you think about constraining human access to data. Every 90 days, my manager has to go back in and say, yep, I still need access to that. If I change teams within the organization, the system automatically revokes access. Why do we do that way? Because our personnel management system, the payroll thing, is the one thing we anchor everything to because we're really good at ensuring that people get their paycheck. And if they move teams, their cost center also changes, so we can track then which team they're working on. Least privilege. How many of you operate data centers? How many of you operate data centers where there is somebody with root access or administrator access to the machines in those data centers? Guess how many shared root accounts we have across our infrastructure, which is worldwide? 0, none. We don't permit it. We assign individuals rights necessary for them to do their work, and we do not permit the use of a shared root credential anywhere. If we don't have a shared root credential, it can't be compromised or misused. I talked earlier about visibility. Visibility is king. And one of the best things about operating in an API-driven environment is that visibility. And automation is your friend here. An interesting point, by the way, and I'll talk a little bit about reduction in human access. We take an incredible amount of effort focused on identifying exactly which human did which thing in our infrastructure. Every single morning, I get a report of every human being who accessed customer information on the EC2 infrastructure for troubleshooting purposes and exactly what command they ran on which boxes. The fact that I can review that report on my iPhone will tell you how many people and how many actions actually take place. The reason there is automation. We really viciously push automation in our infrastructure because it keeps people away from data. It also improves operational stability, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Shrinking protection boundaries. One of the things you'll see across our infrastructure all the time is we are constantly adding new ways for you to control access to smaller and smaller and smaller pieces of information. We internally have this development philosophy called tiny bubbles. Rather than having large containers of information or data, we try and push it down to the smallest possible piece. And you'll see that surface through our APIs, where you can literally write rules that say, I want to store this object of data in S3, and Bob is the only person who can access it, and it has to be between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and he has to be at his desk, and he has to have a multi-factor authentication token in his hand. That's a pretty powerful set of constraints that may not be necessary for every business, but the point is to give you the flexibility to do that kind of implementation if you want. Security by design. This is about making sure that your developers do the right thing every time. It is a systematic approach that formalizes compliance and formalizes good behavior in one construct. We have documentation that your staff is welcome to take a look at here on security by design. But one of the things that's most important to many federal customers out of this is it gives you visibility for your audit teams into everything your developers do without constraining developer velocity. If you give them a good starting point that has the right security controls, and they can use that starting point easily and friction-free, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have high velocity and good visibility. The important thing there is a series of CloudFormation templates. Templates are the easy way to instantiate infrastructure in an automated fashion that ensures that you've got the pieces built in that allow your security teams to the data that they require to do their job. Security and convenience. How many people believe that those two words go together? I do. But it's because I've focused a lot on that. And an interesting little sideline, by the way, on security and convenience. When I first came to Amazon, my first job was running the software development team that built Virtual Private Cloud, our software-defined network infrastructure. So we built all the network protocols and the APIs that go along with them. And I was part of the search team looking for a CISO for our organization. We realized that we needed to have a separate security team from the retail company because a huge number of AWS customers, their largest competitor is Amazon.com. So we needed to make sure that we had a way of ensuring that none of the retailer personnel had access to customer data in AWS. And after looking for a couple of years, my boss, Andy Jassy, said, I'm tired of this search, you're it. And I said, but I don't want to be it. And he said, why? I said, because security slows things down. They're attacks. He said, well, congratulations, you're it. Figure out how you're going to do this without being attacks on the company. And it was a real eye-opening experience, and it's something that I actually have thoroughly enjoyed because it was a sort of reinvention of the way security is practiced. One thing that's kind of a fun fact that I like to bring up to organizations and groups who have significant influence is look at how your security team functions internally. I formally grade my staff on if they say no. Saying no is a failure for a security organization. It's the easy way out. Yes, you can prevent a problem, but you're doing it wrong if you're saying no. What you should be doing is figuring out what the business needs to do and finding a sane way to do it. Well, I need to do analytics, so I'm going to take all this customer data home on my laptop. Ooh, probably not a good idea. But you know what? The business has a need to do something. So let's figure out what a safe and sane way is to do that without having them take all the data home on the laptop. And that's just as true in the commercial sector as it is in the public sector. Yes, there are rules that we must operate by. There are requirements that we must fulfill. But you know what? There are a lot of different ways to do things, but most importantly, there's an attitude change that people can take. And that's not be a policeman and say, stop. Instead, it's, hey, great idea. Let's find a good way to do that that keeps everybody safe at the same time. So how do we do that internally? These are the slides that people love to take home, and we'll find a way to post them so people don't have to take pictures. Number one, define sensible defaults. Make it easy for your folks to do the right thing the right way. Inherent compliance controls. That means if you build your infrastructure from the beginning with the compliance controls you require in it, it's easier for your staff to do things right. Use our available security features. Please make sure your staff are using the features that we make available to you. Things like encryption, which are free. Use them. I am happiest when all my staff has access to is ciphertext. Please use the crypto features we provide. Manage templates, not instances. If you're managing individual machines, you're not doing it the right way. You should be managing templates of machines. That way, when a machine dies, you instantiate a new one and keep going on about your business. Constantly reduce the role of humans. Bill can give you chapter and verse on this one, but we set some audacious goals this year for staff access to data in AWS. Our business is growing like that. I want our staff access to data going like that, despite the growth of the business. So we talked about things like an 80% reduction in human access to information. People say, why did you pick that number? I picked that number for a good reason. You can't do it using people. You have to build automation to do it. If you say reduce human access by 15%, they'll say, okay, I got 10 people on my team, you just don't have access anymore, we'll make the other people do the work. That's not the point. The point is get the humans away from the data. Build tools. The really cool thing about it is, yes, it's a pain in the neck to have to build the tools, but you know what? Who makes mistakes and breaks things when they're in contact with computers, humans or software? It tends to be the humans. Humans cause operational outages. If you build tools that are properly designed, they have better operational stability, which makes the security people happy because humans don't have access to data, makes the operations people happy because you don't have outages. And doing that allows you to concentrate on what matters. Get rid of the chaff and focus on the interesting stuff. If I have many fewer people who have access to data, I can pay much more attention to what every individual is doing on there. So here are the conclusions that we all share. Security is critical. Well, shocker, our business is centered on it. We are creating tools that make security easier. We encourage everybody to use them. Please do so. You can move fast and stay safe at the same time if you do it appropriately. The best news is you don't have to take my word for it. With that, I thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and look forward to talking to you some more of you later. Thanks.